Hello and welcome to NCTV45 and your television history as we explore television and funneling it right down here to Newcastle and the Newcastle area. Well, we have to start. Anything would be remiss if we didn't start with Alan B. Dumont. Alan B. Dumont started the Dumont Television Network, America's pioneer commercial television network, rivaling NBC and CBS for the distinction of being the first overall in the United States. It was owned by Alan B. Dumont, a television equipment and set manufacturer that began operation in June 28, 1942, to be exact. The network was hindered by prohibitive costs of broadcasting, a freeze on new television stations in 1948 by the FCC, and the restricted growth and even the company's partner, Paramount Pictures, despite several innovations in broadcasting and the creation of one of the largest, biggest stars of the 50s. That was Jackie Gleason. Jackie Gleason, check that out, Jackie Gleason and the Honeymooners, if you get a chance. The network found itself on solid financial ground, forced to expand onto UHF channels during an era when UHF tuning was not yet a standard feature on television sets. Dumont fought an uphill battle for programming clearances outside its three operating areas, which were New York, Washington, D.C., and Pittsburgh, ultimately ending the network operations in 1956. But that's a little premature because some things were still in place even past that. Now, Dumont programs aired in 32 cities by 1949. The live coaxial cable feed stretched from Boston to St. Louis. Other stations received programming via kinescope recordings. Dumont Laboratories was founded in 1931 by Alan B. Dumont with only $1,000. The company's television receivers became the gold standard in the industry in 1942. Dumont worked with the U.S. Army, developing radar technology during World War II. This brought in $5 million for the company and gave them that solid footing. Now, Paramount Pictures became a minority shareholder of Dumont Laboratories when it advanced $400,000 in 1939 for a 40% share in the company. Dumont's association with Paramount would come back later to haunt Dumont. Soon after this experimental Washington station signed on, Dumont began experiencing coaxial cable hookups between his laboratories, and his two stations. It was said that one of those broadcasts on the hookup announced that the U.S. had dropped the atomic bomb on Nagasaki, Japan in August 9th, 1945. This was later to be considered an official beginning of the Dumont network for both Thomas T. Goldsmith, the network's chief engineer, and Dumont's best friend, and Dumont himself. These stations prospered, and as I said, in 1948 there was a freeze, and then when its flagship station in New York City, WJZ-TV, now WABC, began broadcasting. CBS also waited until 1948 to begin broadcast operations because it waited for other companies, including Mutual, the Yankee Network, and Paramount. Were interested in starting television networks, but were prevented from successfully doing so because of the restrictive regulations with the FCC. And Paramount Television Network did have some limited success in network operations in the early 40s and 50s. Well, this continued through the late 40s, and in the 50s, Dumont began, it was WDTV, signed on and made it possible for stations in the Midwest to receive live network programming from stations on the East Coast and vice versa. Before, the networks relied on separate regional networks into time zones. Programming, the West Coast received network programming from kinescopes, films shot directly from live television screens originating from the East Cost. On January 11th, 1949, coaxial cable linking the East and the Midwest, known as television circles, such as the Golden Spike in reference to the first transcontinental railroad, was activated. The ceremony was hosted by Dumont and WDTV, which carried all four networks, Chicago, New York, and through a coaxial feed, WDTV signed on in Pittsburgh because the station completed the East Coast Midwest chain, allowing stations to both receive and air programs simultaneously, which is still a standard in US TV. Now, if you're wondering a little bit further down, we're going to talk about WDTV and their broadcast of We the People, in April 1952. The guest is the New York Yankees player Bill Bevan. Benny Goodman and his band were on Dumont, and that in and around 1950. So Dumont was continuing on, and you're probably wondering, now, how does this relate to TV in Newcastle? Well, at that time, the service provider did not have enough circuits to provide signal relays service from the four networks to all their affiliates. At the same time, AT&T allocated times when each network could offer live programming to its affiliates. In 1950, AT&T allotted NBC and CBS each over 100 hours of primetime network service, but gave ABC 53 and Dumont 37, thus setting up something that was, you're probably able to predict it now. AT&T, and I'm not going to give it away, AT&T also required television networks to lease both radio and television lines. Dumont was only a television network without a radio presence. So it was the only network forced to pay for service it did not use. Dumont protested AT&T's actions with the Federal Trade Commission and eventually reached a compromise. Now, as this continued, Dumont aspired to grow beyond its 3 stations, applying for new television stations in Cincinnati and Cleveland. This would give them 5 network-owned and operated stations, the maximum allowed by the FCC at the time. However, Dumont was hampered by Paramount's 2 stations, WKTLA in Los Angeles and WBKB Channel 4, now WBBM TV Channel 2 in Chicago. The descendants of these 2 experimental stations that wrangled Dumont into the 40s, although these stations did not carry Dumont programming, with the exception of WTKL for 1 year, 47 to 48. And in fact, competed against Dumont and its affiliates in those cities. So here's Dumont becoming stronger and stronger, but they had early troubles. They had one big disadvantage with NBC, CBS, and ABC. It did not have a radio network from which to draw on main talent and loyalty, viewer loyalty, and radio profits to underwrite television operating. Now, isn't that something? The radio was underwriting the television until the television medium became profitable. Most early television licenses were granted to established broadcasters, and most long-term relationships with radio networks over the mediums ABC or CBS and NBC, and to a lesser extent ABC, gained their footprint. They began offering programming that drew on their radio backgrounds and bringing in the most popular radio stars. Early television owners, when decided which network they would receive, opted for, to choose CBS with a roster of Lucille Ball, Jack Benny, and Ed Sullivan, or NBC with Milton Berle, Sid Caesar, over Dumont, which had offered then little-known Jackie Gleason and Bishop Fulton J. Sheen. In smaller markets, with limited number of stations, Dumont and ABC were offered regulated to secondary status, so the programs got clearance only if primary network was off the air or delayed by kinescope recording. This created a problem, and then there was the freeze. Okay, well, these stations that were operating, WDTV's only competition came from UHF WENS, now WINP-TV. How about this? And a station WKJF-TV, now WPGH-TV, and WPGH-TV, a distant station from Johnstown, well, that was Channel 53. Pennsylvania and Youngstown, Ohio. And they mention Youngstown, and I don't know why they're not mentioning Newcastle. Well, I know why. In Wheeling, there were also factors if FCC freezes on license. WIIC-TV, now WPXI, battled the Hearst Corporation, over which would eventually become WTAE. Now, perhaps one of the most impactful of Dumont's futures was locally based Westinghouse Electric, owners and operators of KDKA, battling with local groups for the Channel 13 license, which was intended to be a non-commercial station. That's a PBS station. Because what they had was 2, 4, all the way up to 13, until the UHF stations, which go from basically 17 up to 66, became available. Now, the reason that they mentioned Youngstown, Ohio, and not Newcastle, Pennsylvania, wasn't because we didn't have a station. We had WKST TV, Channel 45. That, in order to make way for WTA, and they moved their towers just across the line. And that's why they were recognized in Youngstown, Ohio. CBS requested and was granted Channel 9 in Steubenville, Ohio, and moved it to Pittsburgh so that Steubenville had a chance to have its own television station as a result. Despite severe financial straits, by 1953, Dumont appeared to be on its way to establishing itself as a third network. This was the case despite a smaller footprint than ABC. While Dumont's programs aired live on 16 stations, the network could count only 7 primary stations it owned and operated. They were in Chicago, Los Angeles, and Columbus, Ohio. In contrast, 53 had a full complement of 5 O&Os and ABC. Now, this takes me back to my days at Duquesne. ABC was a descendant of NBC's Blue Network because of certain laws and regulations that were passed. NBC had a red network and a blue network. Okay, the blue network became ABC. ABC had only 14 primary stations, while CBS and NBC had 40 each. In 1951, ABC badly overextended and on the verge of bankruptcy. That year, the station announced a merger with the United Paramount Theaters, formerly a division of Paramount Pictures, which was spun off as a result of the United States versus Paramount Pictures antitrust decision. But it was not until 1953 that the FCC approved the merger. By that time, Dumont had begun differentiating itself from NBC and CBS. It allowed advertisers to choose their locations, and advertisers ran potential savings them millions of dollars by contrast. ABC followed NBC and CBS, practicing of forcing advertisers to purchase large must-buy list of stations, even though